Hey, hey, hey!
Hey. I love
Really scared the cat then.
every opening. I love it. It makes me happy when you yell, hey.
I really startled my cat. This is Business Pants. I'm Damion and Matt. That's Matt Biscardi.
This is Business Pants.
Yeah, this is
we have a packed show today, don't we?
This is our version of the daily financial news, business news about corporations, ESG news, investing, right? Yeah. Today's Wednesday.
Eloquent.
Wednesday's our day where we dive way too deeply into our industry that we work in, which is what I don't even know.
We used to work in ESG, environmental social governance. Kill the acronym. We're getting deep inside the pants of business.
Want to just do it? Want to just go at it?
Yeah, we got to go at it. There's a lot to happen today, so let's go right at it. Agenda time.
Oh yeah, I already said it. So we're going inside the pants. We're going to talk about ourselves, and then we're going to do another installment in our fabulous decade series. We're going to talk about the decades, the old and the new. This time, of course, about ESG, and then Matt's going to make something.
I am going to make something. Mostly, I'm going to make a rant today. It's not going to be. I promise not to be eloquent or timely.
Yeah, Wednesdays really are inelegant show. I don't prepare the show the way I usually do. I usually prepare it like an actual news show with segmented headlines and stories, and then we talk about it. And this is really meant to be, I guess, as close to a conversation as we feel comfortable doing, right, Matt?
Are you saying Wednesdays is our shit show?
I guess. I don't know what it is. This is where we work. We're working out our industry because nobody else does.
Well, this is a big narrative. ESG is a huge narrative right now.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't escape it.
One of the problems is that we worked at an entity, and I'm guessing they're all sort of similar in this regard, where conversation about these things were sort of stifled for some reason, either because people were too embarrassed to talk about it, they're too bored to talk about it, they didn't feel comfortable talking about it. I don't know, but
such a cynic. Maybe they're regulated against it.
Sure. So this is where we talk about it. There's a lot to work out, and we're the only ones, I think, that are working it out.
All right. So let's go. Should we go inside the pants then?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
So what I've learned over the past few months is that without a doubt, ESG is now a real thing. Like at least in the world that talks about, corporations, it talks about business, talks about the market. And I say this because it absolutely was not a thing a few years ago, but I think it's gotten to the point where people are like, okay, we have to reference it, we have to talk about it, we have to say it. It's real, despite the fact that we hate it. It's real, and we have to. Right? I mean, today I was watching something on Bloomberg. And the woman, she's talking about how it's important, it's not going away, it's real, blah, blah, blah. But then, of course, she's making fun of it. It's about feelings, it's subjective. There's always a caveat, right? So
I love feelings.
So this is what we're here to discuss. And this is what we're going to discuss every week. So today I thought, and maybe we talk about this all the time, but there's a few overlapping concepts that I want to kind of steer us towards. And that's that. Why the hell can't ESG be precisely defined?
Yikes.
Why the hell is there not a precisely defined ESG data set itself, right?
Yeah.
And why the hell are ESG ratings so difficult to compare? Like maybe these are all the same question.
And they're all the wrong question.
Okay, so you come at me with what you're thinking and let's go at it a little bit.
Well, let's talk about the ESG ratings themselves. Okay,
so there was a report out of MIT, right? And this is something that's been highlighted in the past. This is not really new, but a recent paper found that in a data set of 5 ESG raters, correlations between scores on 823 companies were on average 0.61. Okay, but before you go don't say anything more. a correlation of 1.0 would equal 100% correlation. This is for all those people who don't understand stats like this, like me. For comparison, credit ratings from Moody's and S&P are correlated at 0.99. So that's essentially the exact same damn rating, right? But at ESG rating companies, the correlation is 0.61. So I don't really know what that means, but what it sounds like to me is that they're different ratings for different companies, right? Like they're not agreeing upon anything really.
Well, that's the thing. I think that's it. I mean, look, a credit rating. So you're an investor, I assume.
Me? No. But
Okay.
yeah.
Well,
the listener.
Let's pretend you're an investor.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
And you go and you buy a bond. The credit rating, whether
Already
you
lost.
like, if you were to do this, the credit rating from Fitch or from Moody's or from S&P, because those are basically all the credit rating providers, they all mean the same thing. They all describe the probability of default.
But how do they get to the point where if they're all separate companies, how do they all get to the same point where their ratings are all
They're all using this, so they're all looking at data from the past, and they're saying historically companies with these characteristics default more than companies with those characteristics.
And do they tweak these ratings as they go along?
You know, there's some secret saucy kind of stuff, but these are and it's important to point out that they are emphatic. These are just their opinions. Okay,
which is kind of bullshit, but yeah.
Their
opinions based on facts.
Based on all this data is that these companies will default more than those companies. Now, empirically, they can actually show that this is largely true historically. But what they're bad at is showing this is largely true 5 years from now, right? Like the credit ratings only actually last like a year. They're supposed to project the next 6 months to a year.
Well, what they really have going for them, though, is that since they have this amazing 0.99 correlation, is that it would seem to me like from an innocent bystander like me, it's like, oh, it must be real then, right? It must be true, right?
Well,
if they're all landing on the same space.
The part that's hiding that most, a regular investor doesn't know is that a credit rating, the way their business model is they go to the companies shop credit rating agencies. The companies will pay the agency to rate their bond. Okay. Now, think that through. There's an immediate conflict of interest, right? Like, because a company will say, every company wants a AAA rating. They want the highest rating. They want the best rating. And they will go from provider to provider and say, we will pay you to rate our bond. But if our bond sucks, I'm less likely to pay you. I'm going to try to find one of the other providers that will give me maybe a slightly better rating, or maybe they'll rate it slightly different.
Okay.
Not to say that the rating agencies do that, but there is a conflict.
But that doesn't explain why the correlation would be the same.
Because they're all competing for the same thing, and they're all using the same data sets, and the companies are basically paying them. And they all solve one thing.
Yeah.
Probability of default. Now, this is where ESG and the ESG ratings providers, which the providers that are in the MIT study are Asset4, KLD, which is not a ratings provider anymore. They're a part of MSCI, and it's a historical data set from like 100 years ago that is not recent. Robeco Sam, Sustainalytics, Vigeo Iris. Okay. They all produce their own ratings, scores, whatever, but they all solve totally different things, or even when they solve the same thing, hypothetically, they solve it in totally different ways with totally different weights on different data sets.
So what do they solve, Matt? I don't know. What are they solving?
Well,
what are they solving for?
They're supposedly they're solving for ESG, but that is okay. Like, are you solving for the environment? Are you solving for governance? Are you solving for social people? Are you solving for whether or not a company is a good corporate citizen, or are you solving for whether or not there's more they're highly risky and they're going to be underwater someday? Like, ESG is a conflated term where everything that's not on a balance sheet or not in a market just gets dumped into ESG. That's kind of what it is. So they're not solving for one thing. That's why you see a report, and that's why you see on Bloomberg TV, somebody saying like, this is about your feelings. It's not about your feelings. Stop it. Just stop.
Okay.
Stop with that.
So why? Why is there no standardization? Why is there no classification system, no taxonomy? Why is this not regulated?
I mean, it's increasingly the focus of regulators to create that taxonomy. There are frameworks.
But you were telling me earlier that the SEC is completely against it.
Yeah, Hester Pierce. Shout out to Hester Pierce, SEC commissioner, who actively thinks ESG is a waste of time. Because honestly, it's great. I love the robust debate it creates.
So is it just a political thing because the commissioners at the SEC are political appointees? So is this what this is?
No, I think there's philosophical feelings about it. I actually think that there's also a psychological effect happening, which I'm going to get into in my rant. It's called functional fixation. We know a thing in accounting. We have a feeling of what markets are supposed to do. Right. And ESG, you can philosophically debate whether or not that is good or bad for markets.
Well, the analogy I made to you earlier, and I apologize for offending anyone. I don't really apologize, but I'm just going to say that. But so I'm an atheist, sure, right? Because I'm highly intelligent. That's the way it works. So my point of view is that I don't crap on any one religion. I don't really care. I don't crap on Christianity or Judaism or Scientology, right? But people have this. People when I talk to them about this, that they will tell me like Scientology is nuts, right? But my point of view is that it's just new. Like the only reason why you think it's nuts is it hasn't been around for thousands of years, and that's what this feels like to me. Because I made the mistake of telling you earlier that I just assumed that all of the accounting standards and accounting data that were created in the 1930s in America were based on objective truths, right? They've been around for so long. I just figured there's something real there, but you're telling me that I might be kind of jumping the gun on that.
Yeah. So that's the great myth. And that's actually the subject of Matt Makes. About the mythology of accounting as a standard and contrasting it against ESG.
So then, so before you go there, so what is the best step forward? Is it to defend ESG data, or is it to attack the grandfather data of accounting and poke holes in that to show that it's all the same? Like, which is the better tactic here?
I just think we're in I think investment theology, so to speak. I know you're an atheist,
which is what we're talking about.
But investor theology needs to start with basic questions about what you're trying to achieve with your investment and what the best way to do that is. Now, and you and I talked about this in pre-production. Ricky Gervais had this really amazing quote about atheism, and I want to apply it to investing, which was, if you burned all science books and you burned all religious texts, and 1,000 years from now, all the science would look the same and the religions would look totally different. Now, investors, you can kind of think of it like, if I burned all investor theology, like what is value investing? What is momentum? What is, what is an index supposed to be? And you just plopped an investor down and said, make some choices with all of this data today.
Yeah.
Would you functionally fixate on one set of data versus all the other sets of data? Or would you say, what if this helps me make my decision? That to me is a fascinating thought experiment, because I think if you were Hester Pierce at the SEC, for instance, and you said, this data over here is important and this data is not important, I actually think if you were just plopped down and you had no training whatsoever and you said, make an investment decision, you would be actually predisposed to use everything in front of you and make different decisions than you do today. We wouldn't be having an argument about these should be correlated or this shouldn't be correlated.
Yeah, you would just say like, I prefer these data sets because they speak to what I think is the value of a company.
I think that's true. And I think you wouldn't call it ESG either. You just call it a bunch of data that undresses a company. You'd kill the acronym.
Okay. Well, so then here's an important distinction is that since some of those other data points have been long established and been around for so long, companies are required to disclose a lot of them in a regulated fashion, in a timely fashion, whereas none of the ESG data essentially is similar. So this is one of the major problems is that we're not getting the same sort of robust data set. So it's almost unfair for the SEC to attack ESG data in that regard, right? Because it's like regulate it first and then attack it. I don't know. It's confusing to me.
Yeah, the SEC. Matt Levine did this amazing article yesterday. Shout out to Matt Levine, who's a Business Pants favorite at Bloomberg. His newsletter is fantastic, where he sort of pointed out this problem, and he pointed it out from the standpoint of like how you view ESG. What is ESG investor preference, or is ESG a single thing? It's like a defined thing that is ESG. Depends on what you expect the company to tell you about ESG. And I think the real argument that the SEC is having is, what should a company disclose? Because in the US, it's all about mandated disclosure. And in the US, they're saying like, well, you're disclosing all this bullshit effectively that is taking up your resources and wasting your time, but investors are demanding it. So the SEC is going after the investors and saying, stop demanding this. It's bullshit. And or asking the question, like, if you're demanding this and it's not bullshit, prove it. And it's a weird way to say it, because it's like, what do you expect you should know about a company to make an investment decision?
Well, this is part of the problem. And this is where I partly agree with them, because if I'm looking at companies in an aggregate, so I'll say I'm looking at like 5,000 US companies, if I don't have the exact same data set on every company, it is kind of bullshit, right? I mean, like, look at the Intel's new incredible diversity and pay gap report. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. It tells me a lot about Intel. It's groundbreaking. I hope it influences other companies. But if I don't have that same data set for everybody else, is it just sort of pointless? Like, what is it? Like, I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, yes and no. But have investors ever had the same exact data for every company?
Well, this is the wrong assumption that I made. You were telling me before about accounting standards and how there are so many different nuances to accounting standards, and that they actually have a choice about how they're going to disclose. And I think I was under the wrong impression that essentially everyone's disclosing the same thing. So this is why I asked the original question of, maybe we're going about this wrong. Instead of defending ESG data, maybe we should be poking holes in the grandfather data.
Well, let's go.
The boomer
should we just
data.
jump right into the rant, or do we want to go? We want to do the next segment. I think this is all
part of the rant. I don't know. We're so long on the first segment that and this is what these shows become. Because if anything, maybe we need to rethink this. Maybe we should just be having. This shouldn't be part of our weekly news. It should be its own series.
Let's so we were going to cover, like, Investopedia has a top 10 search terms.
We'll quickly cover that.
Let's quickly cover that, and then we'll get back into this rant, because I actually think we're covering a lot of ground in two places.
And Investopedia is interesting because, to me at least, because maybe this is one resource that could help with defining ESG data. I mean, I don't know, because it's like, I know a lot of people turn to them to answer questions, and I don't know. So if they're the library, if they're the reference source, then maybe they can be a part of the good. But maybe I'm overstating it. So let's just talk about their list.
All right, let me cue the segment. Here we go.
Yeah. Thank God you cued the segment. It's very important. All right, so this is our decade segment, where we talk about the past year, the past decade, whatever. Today we're talking about Investopedia's top terms of 2019. Investopedia's data science team. You like that? Data science team?
Yeah, everyone's got one of those.
Examined historical data to identify which topics had the most notable influx of visitors over the past 12 months. I don't really know what that means. I don't know what it means, most notable influx of visitors, but whatever.
Lots of people.
Here's the list. it's a strange list, but of course we're on the list, so that's why part of the reason why I grabbed it.
Business Pants is?
Yeah. Business Pants is 10B. No, okay. Ready for the list? I don't know how we're going to discuss this, but I just wanted to plug. I just wanted to plug Investopedia for I don't know why. Here we go. Negative interest rates, the dark web, FIRE, which is financially independent, retire early. These are the terms that people in their universe are thinking about, I guess. Conventional mortgage, negative bond yield, exempt employee. That's a good gig economy one there for you. People at Uber are Googling that one. Sorry, Investopediaing that one. And then here's where it gets weird. Jay-Z.
Obviously.
Yeah, that's right. Jay-Z. Karl Marx.
Why do they not search for Beyonce?
Inverted yield curve. There's another fun one. And finally, the top 10 terms of 2019, according to Investopedia, ESG. So there you go. So ESG, this will be the only time you will ever see a list that has both Jay-Z and ESG on that list. It will never happen again.
I'm publishing one tonight. And honestly,
never happen again.
Like, I'm putting Beyonce. Forget Jay-Z.
Okay.
Beyonce's the brains of that family. We know that.
Sure.
I mean,
so
no offense, Jay-Z.
Is this good for ESG or is this bad? Like,
to get lumped in with negative yield curves and Jay-Z
and dark web and yeah, I mean, I guess what it's telling me is that what this list feels like to me is like it's investor types who come across these terms and are like, what the hell is this?
Yeah,
like,
I think that's it. I think
it's like old boomer types, and they're like, "What the hell is a dark web?" You know, like.
But it goes beyond boomer types. It's basically people like these are the news covers. The news of the last year was talking a lot about interest rates and the Fed, and there's a lot of conversation all the time, I guess, about Jay-Z. But I think ESG is part of zeitgeist. And that's what Investopedia is sort of capturing. They are capturing what the zeitgeist is just by what people don't understand.
Yeah, and that's part of
for information on.
Right, and that's just part of the impetus for creating this company is that we're very much interested in the narratives around these stories, right? And for 2019, these are some of the key parts of that narrative.
What's fascinating about a list like that from a place like Investopedia is the way Investopedia then defines it and the content they create around it as sort of a content creator is hugely influential in the way people who are looking for definitions, who are looking for understanding, actually approach these topics. Now, I don't know about Jay-Z.
Yeah, you do.
I mean, I could Investopedia it, I suppose. But when it comes to ESG,
yeah,
like it means that not only does no one understand what ESG is, because they're looking for like one thing that ESG is, but they are going to the most, influential sort of reference point in the investor universe, arguably, which is Investopedia. I mean, raise your hand. If you're an analyst and you're listening to this, there is a 100% chance that you looked up some shit in the last week on Investopedia.
Oh, yeah. You probably plagiarized it too.
And then you went to like a client or you were writing a report and you just spouted it like that's what it fucking is. Like there's a 100% chance that Investopedia influenced your understanding of some basic investor concept. Mm-hmm. And I think that like ESG is part of that. So congratulations, Investopedia, for shaping all of our brains.
And if you're listening to Investopedia, which you should be, because you just should, feel free to reach out and we can talk more about your list.
Yeah, I'm going to call them. I'm going to call Caleb.
All right, that's my list for today. Do you want to just like segue back into more ESG ranting?
Yeah, give me a buzzer, and I'm gonna okay. Matt make us.
And have we did we do a good job in the first conversation?
No.
That's always my question about this. Like, do we? do we ever get to where we want to get to?
Well, I think there's a philosophical conversation that's unfolding, and it's hard to like pin down the answer of a philosophical conversation. So what I'm going to do now, buzz me in. I'm going to harp us, and then I'm going to do something to kind of further it, hopefully.
All right. That's your soft entry. So I'm not allowed to cut in and argue with you here?
Please do, because otherwise I will rant ad nauseum. This show's going to go long. It's already going long. This is just the nature of what this is.
Because unfortunately, we had a pre-production meeting that lasted way too long, which we always do on Wednesday when we talk.
It's something about ESG, because there's this ongoing argument. But what I want to do is I want to juxtapose ESG against what we think of as accounting. Okay? So first of all, people like you coming into this think there's one accounting.
Idiots. Yeah.
There's just accounting, right? Like an accountant wakes up, they go to work, they look at their numbers, they, make their adjustments that they need to make based on some, rules or, settings. And then they show up with like, okay, here's your balance sheet. This is what a balance sheet looks like. I can take a balance sheet from a mining company and a balance sheet from a bank, and I at least have a common language. Now, the background of accounting in the US, but also sort of globally, is more than 100 years old, right? Like where this comes from and the rules that we're looking at are codified over 100 years. And the problem is that ESG people look at this data, they look at ratings, they look at the disclosure, and they say like, oh, this company, does some lobbying, and this company gives some philanthropic dollars, and this one said carbon is 100 or whatever. The problem with ESG is we expect there to be, like in accounting, one set of numbers to rule them all. One ESG-ness, like the Lord of the fucking Rings. But it's not that, okay? And this is a fundamental problem with comparing an accounting standard or a standard like that with ESG to me in my brain. Now, I'm not saying ESG doesn't need standards. What I'm saying is there's not one. You, in fact, might need multiple.
There's not one in 2019, but are you going to answer the question, which is, should there be a standard?
Well, I'm going to give you my opinion, and maybe that opinion will change. Because I think in 2019, what we really have is a three-legged stool, okay? You're an investor. Every single company, every single decision you have to make is basically, and for the record, everyone loves a good three-legged stool metaphor. So
yeah, I think you've used this metaphor before, actually.
I'm sticking with it. You have three sets of data effectively that you're using to make every investment decision: accounting data, market data, and real world data. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, real world data, there is no standard for that. Like, how do you get real world data? Like,
well, not yet. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
But can you ever expect, like, real world data includes stuff like satellite images of parking lots to determine whether or not there are a lot of customers at a place today, right? Like, is that ever going to get standardized? There's no way that gets standardized.
Okay. I would disagree, but keep going.
Accounting data has a standard, and market data has a standard in as much as there is recorded prices and volume.
Right.
There are some metrics that are common, and index companies go out to countries and they basically say, here's the set of market metrics that need to be available before we can even consider a country, for a publicly traded index. Real world data sort of sits outside all of that, but this is where ESG is right now. ESG is very much real world data, but I want to contrast it against what we think of as accounting data. Because accounting data by itself, there's actually two really big schools of accounting data. There is US GAAP, which most people have heard of, if maybe some people haven't heard of. It's basically a set of rules. In 1934, the SEC decided, here are the rules for what you have to disclose. They did that after the Great Depression. They put in place a standard that was based off of what was created by a bunch of accountants for railroads in the 1890s, which was also created out of what came out of the panic of 1864 from, credit rating agencies. Basically, it was created kind of randomly out of investor demand over the course of 50 years or 60 years to create a set of rules. Now, those rules have basically been in place, and we've just argued about what they are for 100 years. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Which makes
everywhere,
them feel real.
that's the U.S., okay?
Right.
It's like the NFL. The NFL loves to set up some rules, and then every year they debate them, and everyone argues that they're wrong, okay? And then we watch the games anyway. Everywhere else in the world, it's like soccer. There are principles. There are rules, sure, but there's the principles of what you're trying to achieve. Everywhere else uses IFRS to some, IFRS to others, maybe somewhere. But it basically says there's the principle about what a company is supposed to tell you. That is, they're supposed to be transparent about how they make their money, and then you can argue about whether or not they're complying with the principles.
Wait, so I'm hold on, I'm lost. How is that different than the U.S. GAAP?
Because they're not saying you need to disclose this line item, right? They're saying like there's a set of principles that you need to achieve.
Oh, okay.
And then they work backwards off the principles. In the U.S., they say, here are the set of rules. And then they debate the individual rules and add, and
But the important part there is that the U.S. GAAP rules were reactive to something catastrophic.
Always.
Right?
Yes. Right. It's usually two things. Disaster, like the Great Depression, and technology. Okay. So like the rules basically are created off of those two things. Now, I want to focus on US GAAP because it's interesting to me. Because while we sit here and we debate what ESG rules should be, what disclosure should look like or whatever, it's important to know that the US Supreme Court actually recognized 19 different, quote, GAAP sources. That means effectively there's almost 20 variations of GAAP, right? So when you see a set of accounting metrics from a U.S. company, it's one of 19 different flavors of Ben and Jerry's accounting.
Okay. I don't really understand that, but yeah.
It just means that there's large built-in assumptions. In fact, there's sort of this umbrella of 7 different kind of assumption packages that you can make. One of those packages, I'm going to give you an example of one of them, just to illustrate the point.
Why is it so broad? Why are there 19 different sources recognized?
Well, this is just what the U.S. Supreme Court said, because
in 1934?
No. In like the last 15 years, because there was a case, Shalala versus Guernsey Hospital, and it got argued in front of the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court was like, well, hey man, there's like so many variations of this thing, it's really hard to tell what the right is and what the wrong is. And one example of a variation is something called LIFO, last in, first out, versus FIFO, first in, first out. I don't care about the terms. This is boring as shit. But here's the concept, okay?
Yeah, agreed.
If you are a company, you are a company, you start a little company, you start it in your room, you buy a bunch of gears, you want to make Mickey Mouse watches, knock off Mickey Mouse watches. You buy some gears, okay? You buy one set of gears, it costs you $10. You buy another set of gears, like, the next week it costs you $5 because, I don't know, the economy changed. You can sell the watches for $20. Now you make 2 watches. One costs you $10, one costs you $5. You sell one watch for $20. How much profit did you make on that watch? Did you make $10 of profit because the gears that cost $10 you bought most recently and that's the one you chose to sell? Or did you make $15 of profit because the gears you bought first is the one that you sold? This is a really, really basic assumption that every company has to make. You go out and you buy some shit, the cost of that shit changes over time, and you have to make an assumption of, you know what? The old shit is the stuff we're selling first, or we're just going to sell the newest stuff first, and you can change up, but you basically have to tell your investors, we chose to LIFO or FIFO, the last stuff we bought or the first stuff we bought.
But at least they're telling you the standard they used.
Except when you're making 1 million Mickey Mouse knockoff watches, you have no real idea how much the last stuff cost versus the first stuff cost, because time is such a fickle thing, right? Like, it's really hard. This is one tiny assumption, and I don't mean tiny like small implications. I mean like one of many, 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 many assumptions that gets made in a balance sheet that you see at the end. And I'm no accountant. I am no expert. I know enough to be dangerous, but not enough to know how all those assumptions get built in. I also know that there's a company called Audit Analytics, And they put out, every single year, they put out a report, shout out to Audit Analytics, about financial restatements. This is when a company gives you a report with a bunch of numbers, and then a little bit later, they have to go back and say, we have to alter the report with the numbers.
Oops.
What they found was nearly 6% of U.S. publicly traded companies in 2018 had to issue a restatement of some kind. After the financial crisis, that number was 20%. Okay, so 1 in 5 companies after a major crisis actually had to restate their financials. Also, the SEC in the last 5 years opened up more than 500 investigations into accounting practices at companies or by accountants.
That's about 100 a year.
That's about 100 a year. So this is telling you, how much should we really trust what a company is telling us in our accounting statements, where there's 19 variations and maybe a million assumptions that go into it? My argument would be maybe not so much. I mean, I know that it's existed for a long time, but if you're not asking the question, should I trust this? Maybe you're not doing justice to your due diligence, which is why the sell side and fundamental analysts exists. You ask all the time, why is this industry so big? Why does this exist? Because what they're really doing is trying to unwind the nonsense that is accounting.
Right.
Now, I want to bring it home by saying, so there's a metric called forensic accounting, where this is what effectively the sell side does in some way, where they're dissecting accounting statements. And there's ways to do this mathematically. MSCI, our mothership, has one. Agnes Grunfeld helped create it. You know Agnes. Agnes is the queen, right? Like, there are other Audit Analytics does the same thing. CFRA is another company that does this. I'm going to go with Agnes because Agnes I know, and she's the queen. The model that MSCI ESG uses is called AGR. No one cares what it's called. Effectively, what it said is 10% of companies in the entire world globally have been found to have very aggressive accounting practices. This does not mean it's fraud. What it means is that they're somehow like, they stick out like a sore thumb. They're making assumptions somewhere, or they stand out from their peers, and you're kind of like, what the hell's going on at this company? Why are their numbers so different? Or why are there all these flags?
Yeah.
All of this comes down to one thing to me. And we're way over time, but I don't care. It comes down to one thing. It's called functional fixation. Functional fixation is a psychological term that actually the original committee that created GAAP, the chair of the committee, his name is George O'Malley. Or George Malley. George O'Malley or George Malley? I don't know. George, I'm sorry. You've been dead for like 70 years. But he actually pointed this out, that markets have what's called a functional fixation. They do things one way, they learn it, and then they think that's the way. Okay. It's a psychological problem. We have a functional fixation with what an accounting framework should look like, what numbers a company should tell us should look like. Investors then come to ESG, to bring this back to ESG, because that's the point.
Yeah.
They come to ESG with the tiniest violin going, well, we don't have a standard, because we have a functional fixation with what a standard is for investing, for what data looks like.
We should really be calling it like old data versus new data.
That's exactly right. In fact, we should be starting is with a question, which is, what is my investment supposed to do for me? Is my investment, is my goal asset survival, system survival? Is it the survival of my soul? Is it just making money tomorrow? Is it sitting in this thing for 10 years? The investor's job is to define what they're trying to do. And if you are waiting for an ESG standard, then you are not doing your fucking job, because it's not a matter. It's to me, it's not a matter of there needs to be a standard. I don't disagree that there can or should be standards. It's a matter of, what am I trying to do, and what exists out there right now to help me do it? That's it.
But I guess what I would ask you is, but the old data, since it's old, is just it's attainable, right? So is asking for ESG data or new data to be regulated just a way of asking, like, can we get more of it, please?
I mean, like, fine. If that's the question, can we get more of it? Fine. And I know that companies want to know what they should be disclosing, and investors want to say, we want more, right? Isn't that all that ever happens? Like, investors say, give me more, and companies say, yeah, but what? Or that's expensive. Right now, the SEC is effectively saying, this is expensive for companies, they shouldn't do it. They're taking the side of companies, not investors. That's the interesting part.
Which is why I asked if it's a political decision. Right?
Because to me, is more data good or bad? Making a decision. Period. Is it good or bad? And yes, good, right? It can be too expensive to create. But guess what? Companies don't create. This is another important point about ESG ratings, especially from the mothership's ratings, because I did the analysis. 60 to 70% of an ESG rating at MSCI ESG does not come from what the company voluntarily tells you. It doesn't come from carbon. It doesn't come from like philanthropic giving or lobbying or whatever the company sort of volunteers around this ESG-ish stuff. It comes from their mandatory governance disclosures or shit like the World Bank and academic literature. Shit like, is my facility going to be underwater? Or, how many obese people are in this country? Or it comes from these macro data sets that have nothing to do with the company specifically telling it to you, which suggests to me it's not that there's not enough data to make a decision. It's not that the data's totally sucky. It's that if you're only functionally fixated on what a company tells you, you're not doing your job, because there's so much data that can help you make a decision that we're lumping into ESG and saying is not good enough. There's so much data out there that we shouldn't actually be complaining. We can codify little bits of data here and there. We can help make taxonomies, which is what they're doing in the EU. I think that's all good, but it's not like the whole space should be lumped into one acronym. It should be, what are you trying to achieve, and what all data, out of all the data in the universe, what's out there?
Well, maybe the complaint is more along the lines of, so this new data is a real thing, right? ESG is real. I mean, it's on a list with Jay-Z, so it's right. It's real. So can we get more of it, please? Like, if we're gonna do this and we're gonna talk about it, which we are.
Wrong.
You're cutting me off. How dare you?
Wrong segment.
If we're gonna talk about it, then we need more of it. We need to regulate.
We do. Define it. I don't disagree with you. I'm not saying we should stop. I'm saying that
it's real now.
I'm saying that it's like the conversation about whether or not this is valuable is a stupid fucking conversation. Of course, some of it's valuable and some of it's not.
Okay, but I would argue
the data.
I would argue, is it valuable if it's incomplete? This is what always bugged me about working at these ESG data providers, is that the data set is incomplete.
I would argue that every data set is incomplete.
Okay, well this is a different conversation.
Because like, if you're a sell-side analyst and you're talking to management, are you talking to every management? I remember getting in a conversation with a portfolio manager who told me we got a rating wrong on a company because he knew that their company culture was amazing, everyone loved their managers, and they were great to work for. And I said, do you know every company in this industry globally?
Yeah, you're making my point.
Or just that one? Because if you know just that one, great. You make your decision based on a sample size of one, that's up to you. But if you know something about all of them, anything, a little bit about all of them, one random data point about all of them that can differentiate, that makes your point that much stronger, whether you're right or wrong.
There should be a fourth leg on your stool, which is really like intuition, hunches, guesses, that kind of thing, right? I mean, isn't that what we're talking about?
Well, that's not data. That's action. So you're already making a different stool, or like a stool sample, maybe.
All right. Well, I still don't think we've really even begun.
We're not going to crack this nut.
We're just scratching at the surface here.
But we're at like 46 minutes into this podcast.
Yeah,
I think it's time
to the whole thing.
I think it's time to call it.
One thing we've agreed upon is that maybe we should be calling it new data and old data. That's what we're going to maybe.
I'm with you, but let's
Scientology versus Christianity. That's what this is. ESG is Scientology. Yeah, you heard it here.
Oh, please! You just alienated everybody. This was Business Pants today. It's ESG Wednesday. It's awesome. December 18th. It's the 18th.
Yeah.
It's Wednesday, December 18th, 2019. That was Damion Rollis. I am Matt Muscardi. Thanks to our production team here, including our executive producer, Courtney Rowe, our advisor, Courtney Cook, our other advisor, Dan Rogachnik, music by Todd Hovanek, art and design by John Walsh. We have an amazing team here at Free Float Media that puts this together. And thanks to you for listening. We really want you to share this, to rate us, to subscribe, because we want to keep doing this. And if you don't do those things, eventually we're going to have to get jobs, I think. Oh, that sounds terrible. If you have questions for us, please reach out to us either at freeflowmedia.com. You can see us live on Twitch and Periscope and YouTube Monday through Thursday, noon Eastern, or you can get the podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you, Damion. We will be back tomorrow with a
Why are you making the show longer? What are you
big
doing?
Bag of biz nuggets tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
More lighthearted tomorrow.
I'll talk to you tomorrow.